wrestlers who are married to other wrestlers. In pro wrestling, many a storyline revolves around a not-so-blessed and most often kayfabe event. Who could ever forget the time that Stephanie McMahon was nearly forced to become the Bride of Darkness? On the other hand, who'd ever want to remember that mess where Tamina, Tozawa, Dana Brooke, and Reggie all more or less married each other for a hot minute before the usual 24/7 brawl broke out? While such on-screen shenanigans may give the viewer the distinct impression that all wrestling marriages are fake, there have been a surprising number of shoot weddings, with quite a few of these still going strong. Before we get to our list, a brief note on how we selected the names. In all cases, both partners did have an in-ring career, no matter how short-lived. What's more, all are still married, still alive, and at least one of them is still appearing in an on-screen role with a major promotion. The only possible exception to this last stipulation may be Michelle McCool and Undertaker. She seems to be more or less retired now, and he says he's done with wrestling as well. But what with his WWE-sponsored One Dead Man show occurring alongside many of the recent PPVs, it's like he hardly left at all. 1. AJ Mendes and CM Punk. As of time of writing, Punk is still signed to AEW, but he's less visible than John Cena in his prime, and as to his future with that or any other company, who can say? Punk is Punk, and you can never count him out or write him off. AJ Mendes, formerly AJ Lee, however, just started working as a color commentator with the newly created WOW Women of Wrestling, which, who knows, could well turn into a major promo, or at least a Netflix series given a little time. As to how these two crazy kids met, it seems they had a romance made in kayfabe heaven. As the Sportster tells it, Lee, as she was then known, was involved in a scripted romance that went sour with the Bryan Danielson, or Daniel Bryan as he was known then, and subsequently found herself in a triangle with both Bryan and his in-ring rival Punk. While the storyline eventually fizzled out, as all stories must, the twosome sans Bryan started dating for real the following year and tied the knot in 2014. 2. Becky Lynch and Seth Rollins. Despite Matt Riddle taunting Seth Rollins that, "There's only one man in your marriage and that's Becky." And yes, despite the fact that Rollins himself has admitted via Sportskeeda that he struggled a bit with the fact that his wife has been the first and so far only one in the family to main event WrestleMania. The last kicker and her Mr. may be one of the most equally matched couples on the list. Both wrestle for the same promotion, both are major stars, and both seem pretty firmly entrenched in the WWE universe. The US Sun tells it, Lynch and Rollins first met in NXT in 2012, and while they were the proverbial just good friends at first, they eventually became a little more tea. By 2019, they finally admitted they were in a relationship, and it was in this year that they became engaged as well. The actual wedding didn't take place for another 2 years, however. Not only was there a slight matter of a worldwide pandemic that kind of put a kink in everyone's plans, but they also had a baby daughter, Rue, in December of 2020. In June of 2021, however, People reports that the couple finally made it down the aisle. The honeymoon must not have been an extended one, however, as Rollins was back competing at Money in the Bank a few weeks later, while Lynch herself would return to the ring at SummerSlam. 3. Beth Phoenix and Edge. The Glamazon and Rated R Superstar are one of those larger-than-life couples that actually seem pretty perfect together. According to Sportskeeda, they started dating late in 2010, after Phoenix had finalized her divorce from Joey Knight. A year later, Edge retired from wrestling for the first time, obviously, and was promptly inducted into the Hall of Fame, thanking his girlfriend in his acceptance speech. Within 2 years, the couple would welcome their first mini Glamazon, with the second coming along 3 years later. A few months after the birth of daughter 2, Beth and Edge finally got around to saying "I do," possibly as a way to celebrate. Edge's big 4-0 since the wedding took place on the same day, October 30th, 2016. While Beth Phoenix had her own Hall of Fame induction in 2017, she never entirely retired from the ring, competing in a fatal 4-way Women's Tag Team Championship match at WrestleMania 35, and then doing commentary on NXT from 2019 to 2021. After Edge, too, unretired in 2020, both halves of this dynamic duo would appear together at the Royal Rumble in 2022, going up against The Miz and Maurice in a mixed tag team match billed as Grit Couple Against It Couple. More recently, Phoenix came to the aid of her husband at Extreme Rules. For her trouble, she was laid out by a concerto from Rhea Ripley and has been missing in action ever since. but we're eagerly awaiting her return and revenge. 4. Bianca Belair and Montez Ford. On the surface, Montez Ford and Seth Rollins may not seem to have too much in common. But there's one thing that both know all too well: what it feels like to have your wife main event WrestleMania when there are no plans for you to do so. Ford, however, actually seems pretty unfazed by the fact that his wife, Bianca Belair, is at this point a far bigger star than he is. When asked about seeing his wife's historic match with Sasha Banks, he told The Bubba Show that he found it inspirational, saying, "You know what? If I ever get the chance to do the same thing on the WrestleMania stage, I'm going to make sure I go all the way out like they did." Might not come a surprise then to learn that, as Ford and Belair admitted to it, she was the one who made the first move. They met when both were working NXT shows in 2016, and after a somewhat bumpy start to the relationship, they finally walked down the aisle in 2018. Belair has since been enjoying the role of stepmom to Ford's kids from a previous marriage, via Fight Fans, but she said that when they expand their family, both she and Ford will be taking a year off together to enjoy some baby bonding time before they get back to the family business of kicking butts and taking belts. 5. Booker T and Charmal. Booker T, now pushing 60, isn't exactly retired from the ring. While his role with WWE these days is that of a commentator, he's wrestled with his own reality of wrestling Fed as recently as summer 2022 and has said he's nowhere near planning his own last match yet. His wife Charmal, though 5 years younger than her husband, is long since retired from taking such an active role, although she too is involved with reality of wrestling. She's also now a WWE Hall of Famer, joining Undertaker and Vader as the 2022 inductees. Charmal, according to the Sportster, was a former dancer and beauty queen who started her wrestling career as a WCW Nitro girl. When that promotion went kaput, she eventually landed a gig as a backstage interviewer with WWE before being dropped from the roster in 2002. When she came back to WWE in 2005, it was as Booker T's valet, and later in the year the two would marry. When Booker T won King of the Ring in 2006, she reigned at his side as Queen Charmal, and the year after that, she left with him when he departed for TNA. While the couple's wrestling careers have undergone quite a few metamorphoses over the years, both are still employed in the business that is their shared passion. Their marriage, as well as their careers, also appears to be rock solid. 6. Brandi and Cody Rhodes. Brandi and Cody Rhodes met in 2011 while both were signed to WWE. US Magazine says they bonded over a shared love of horror and were still with the company when they wed in 2013. Still, they didn't really achieve that true power duo status until they left the company, toured the Indies and Japan, and became first couple of AEW in 2019. When they had their first child in 2021, the event was thoroughly documented by their reality show Rhodes to the Top. It wasn't Brandi's first trip round the realityverse, as she'd earlier appeared on a show called Wags Atlanta, which sadly had nothing to do with dogs. As of the time of writing, Cody's had a cup of coffee back in WWE before getting himself re-injured, while Brandi remains unsigned despite the fact that she's been very vocal about wanting to get back in the ring. 7. Brie Bella and Bryan Danielson. Brie Bella and Bryan Danielson are one of wrestling's odder couples. He's known as one of the best technical wrestlers ever to step into a ring, while she is known for twin magic and co-starring in the reality show Total Bellas with her sister Nikki. Still, they do say that opposites attract, so there's that. The Sportster tells us that the Danielson-Bella match was enough, another WWE romance scripted into being. Although at one point it seemed like a toss-up as to which twin would walk away with the prize, as both sisters kayfabe battled over Danielson or Bryan. As he was then, while Michael Cole snarked in the background. Eventually both twins would ditch Danielson when they caught him smooching Gail Kim, but by this time, the whole mess taking place circa 2010, Brie and Danielson were dating for real. The couple married in 2014 and welcomed their first child in 2016, the same year Danielson first retired. The second and third kids, as per People, would come along 5 years later. Guess it's true about twins running in families. Somewhere along the way, Brie would also become a vegan like her husband. Where she will not follow him, though, is all the way to AEW. Danielson joined the promotion in 2021, but both Bella twins appeared in WWE's 2022 Royal Rumble. 8. Candice LeRae and Johnny Gargano. Johnny Gargano, the one-time NXT star who's now appearing on Raw, has had quite a lengthy career for a man who's only in his mid-30 seconds. As he once told AZ Central, he turned pro at the age of 16, so he's going on his second decade in the business. His wife, Candice LeRae, is 2 years older, although she too got a pretty early start on her career when she was just 17. At the time the two met, they were both still in the indies, and they initially bonded over shared passions for mainstream geekery, such as the Star Wars and Spider-Man franchises. It seems the couple now have something else to share, well, several things actually. Gargano left NXT in December of 2021, while LeRae left in May 2022, after having been out of action for a while. This means they both got to spend some time at home playing with baby wrestling, who came along in February. Before the child could bust out his first slingshot spear or curb stomp though, Daddy and Mommy were both back with WWE under the new Triple H regime. This time around, however, they finally made it to the big leagues, as both are signed to Raw. 9. Carmella and Corey Graves. Carmella and Corey Graves are the official TMI couple of WWE. She's still wrestling, and he's far more effective putting the smackdown on people with his mouth behind the announce table. They're the heel couple we love to hate on screen, with Mella's ridiculous mask and Graves' hideous neck tattoos. Off-screen, there's also the fact that he's alleged to have started romancing Carmella while still married to his first wife, so that's problematic. Worst of all, though, was Corey Amp Carmella, the short-lived reality show that demonstrated the couple's capacity to be cringe 24/7, including candid descriptions of their sex lives. Graves told the New York Post, "It's 2022. Why are we still ashamed of this natural human activity?" Whatever your reaction to that may be, Graves and Carmella got married in April 2022. At least there hasn't been a new episode of their show since they tied the knot though, and for that we are truly grateful. 10. Charlotte Flair and Andrade El Idolo. While Charlotte Flair is the second-generation queen of WWE, Andrade El Idolo was a mid-carder in that company and now occupies a similar slot in AEW. Still, Charlotte seems unfazed by the difference in status. During an interview with People at the time of their wedding, she credited her new husband with opening my eyes to travel and life and love and how to enjoy both life and work at the same time. 5 months after Flair tapped out to Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania Backlash, she's yet to return to the ring. While Andrade has said, "I hope she comes back soon," he's also added, "Right now we are good because I get to see her more." In fact, the air is thick with rumors that El Idolo is considering making a change himself in order to spend more time with his new bride. He's been throwing hands backstage with Sammy Guevara, as well as dropping hint bombs all over social media that make it pretty clear he's not happy with his current employer. Does Andrade having the Nature Boy as a father-in-law give him enough clout to get hired on again by WWE though? Or are he and his wife forever to be separated by feuding companies? 11. Chelsea Green and Matt Cardona. Chelsea Green and Matt Cardona are one of pro wrestling's lesser-known married couples among casual fans. But that has less to do with them keeping their relationship on the down low, and more to do with the fact that Cardona, formerly known as Zack Ryder, never quite achieved Hall of Fame status, while Green's own run with WWE was not an unqualified success. More recently, however, the couple have had a pretty good run of it working together in Impact Wrestling. Plus, they also found the time to get married in January 2022. The wedding, which took place in Las Vegas, was attended by a few of their former co-workers, including Dolph Ziggler, Maurice and The Miz, and Cody and Cody Rhodes. In fact, as Fox 28 reveals, the latter couple actually introduced Green and Cardona. The two later renewed their vows during GCW Homecoming in August of 2022, with Cardona dressed as Randy Savage from his on-screen marriage to Miss Elizabeth. 12. Lana and Meo. WWE isn't always in the business of keeping couples apart. During their pandemic-era mass releasing, they dumped the superstar formerly known as Rusev. Then a year later, via News 18, they released his wife Lana as well. Fans hoped she'd join the rechristened Meo on AEW, but even though she's said she wants to wrestle again, to date she's yet to sign with any company. Back when the twosome were together in WWE, they worked with each other on numerous occasions. At times it may have seemed like their marriage was kayfabe, but instead, it was Lana's affairs with Dolph Ziggler and Bobby Lashley that were as phony as her Russian accent. While Miro told YouTuber Chris Van Vliet that he and Lana originally bonded over their shared Eastern European background. He really is Bulgarian, while his wife, real name CJ Perry, is a native Floridian who lived in Latvia as a child due to her father's missionary work. Still, we're sure Miro figured that out long ago, and he and Lana are still together. They have wrestling in common after all, plus both of them are very religious. Yes, that Redeemer character is no act. As Miro once told the New York Post, nobody is used to religion talk in professional wrestling, but he loves AEW for letting him be himself. That's the reason he signed a lengthy contract extension, so it looks like he'll be sticking around whether or not Lana joins him. Back in 2000 and Mike Bennett. Back in 2005, Maria Kanellis met someone she told Mickie James was the man I'm gonna marry. That man was CM Punk, thus proving that prognostication is not really Kanellis's forte. Although the couple did date for a few years, Sportskeeda notes that Punk had previously dated James as well, and would go on to have a number of relationships with other wrestlers before settling down with AJ Mendes. Luckily for Kanellis, she would eventually meet her own special someone, that being Mike Bennett. Bennett and Kanellis were dating by 2011 when she was in WWE and he was signed to Ring of Honor. By the time they married in 2014, PW Insider reports that he was still with ROH and she was resting between engagements, as they say. The couple eventually found themselves employed by WWE at the same time, but then both of them got the boot in 2020. Most recently, the twosome signed with AEW along with fellow Kingdom member Mike Taven. While their debut was met with a mixed reaction by wrestling fans on Twitter, there's no doubt this heel couple plus one can take all the heat and come back for more. 14. Maurice and The Miz. Yet another mixed pair of heels whose names both start with M are the Mizanins, also known as The Miz and his Mrs. Maurice. The couple first met, as per US Magazine, when she auditioned for WWE Diva Search in 2006. She didn't make it past the second round, but was later signed to a developmental contract and would be appearing on SmackDown by 2008. While WWE would wish her the best in all of her future endeavors in October of 2011, they weren't rid of her that easily, since she'd be marrying The Miz 2 years later. By 2016, Maurice was back in the ring supporting her spouse. This is a position she has yet to relinquish and likely won't give up without a hell of a fight. In addition to their shared wrestling career, the Mizanins also have 2 daughters together, with both girls having the family's signature alliterative names. Monroe was born in 2018, while Madison followed in 2019. In 2022, the family adopted a dog, but perhaps they'd run out of M names by then since he goes by Wolf instead. The Miz also returned to his reality TV roots in 2018 with the debut of Miz and Mrs. the USA Network. 15. Mia Yim and Keith Lee. While Mia Yim and Keith Lee appeared together for several years in WWE, both starting out in NXT and then working their way up to the main roster, Sportskeeda says they actually started dating sometime prior to signing on with Vince McMahon and company. When they left the company though, they left together, as both got their pink slips in November of 2021. Yim and Lee made the most of their hiatus from wrestling, however, as they got married in 2022. Wedding guest Shelton Benjamin, posting to Instagram about the wedding, revealed that the officiant was the hardcore legend himself, Mick Foley. If you take a close look at the wedding cake photo, you can also see that the topper was made to look like Yim and Lee dressed as Star Wars characters, although their actual wedding attire was more conventional. Few days after the wedding, Lee made his AEW debut, and in July he and partner Swerve Strickland won the AEW World Tag Team title, and then dropped it to the Acclaimed 2 months later. As for Yim, she signed on with Impact instead, before returning to the WWE in November of 2022. When asked why she didn't follow her new husband to AEW, Yim told Metro that it was her own personal preference since the couple don't feel they need to be joined at the hip or bundled as a package deal. As she puts it, as long as we support each other with whatever it is, we don't always have to be together. 16. Michelle McCool and Undertaker. While Michelle McCool was a pretty good wrestler in her own right back in the day, today she is known first and foremost as Mrs. Undertaker. Well, that's pretty much the way it's going to be if you marry anyone who's at that level. Even now, when women's wrestling is taken far more seriously than it was in the Divas era, it's hard to think of any women or men, for that matter, who are poised to achieve Taker's level of superstardom. While McCool and her dead men have been together a dozen years now, they married in 2010, making theirs the longest-lasting of his 3 marriages. They had a pretty rough go of it in the beginning. As McCool told the Chasing Glory podcast, she got major backstage heat for dating a top guy, and says this is the reason why she ended up retiring in 2011. 9 years later, her husband joined her in retirement. He swears he's not going to pull a Ric Flair and keep coming back for one last hurrah, but it's early days yet, so apart from those periodic One Deadman shows he does. As far as we know, Mr. and Mrs. Taker are just sitting around at home. In fact, that's exactly what they are doing in a photo published by Inside the Ropes. McCool and their daughter look pretty happy, Taker not so much. But then, maybe he's just got resting dead face after all these years.